Hello and welcome back to another YouTube video. Today I'm doing my 14.22 ADC Tierlist. So for content, subscribe and let's get into it. There were a couple of changes impacting the ADC role this patch. Primarily Yuntal Wild Arrows and Static Shiv both being adjusted in ways which pretty heavily impacted certain champions. The main kind of nerfs and buffs of this patch though were Seraphine and Corki as two overperformers within the role. Swain got a really hefty, sizable buff. He just landed underpowered, and they wanted to buff him back up to a state where people would consistently play him. Vayne also took a bit of a buff, and those were the main changes. So let's get into it. The D tier event is going to have a slight shift around. Callista's going to remain here. She's once again a champion which I would never really recommend for mid and low elo. Obviously very hard to pilot, very early game skewed. Requires considerably more precision than a lot of the other marksmen within the pool. There's just a lot of things which really prohibit this champion from being considerably viable unless her numbers are just too high for the average player. So this is not a pick which is going to be really recommendable at the moment. Twitch is being dropped down from the C to the D tier. He's probably just outright the worst marksman in the game at the moment. He's not being buffed in 14.23, which I know a lot of people are frustrated about. He should have been buffed probably in the previous patch when Bork on Earth, like the one even before that. He's just underperforming at the moment. He does need a bit of help. The other problems with him is that the item system just isn't really benefiting him at the moment. With Yuntals being buffed in 14.23, the item should be in a really good spot. We might start seeing some shift over from Bork to Yuntals, but it doesn't really fix the champion's issues in his current state. He definitely drops down to the D tier at the moment. The C tier then is going to consist of Smolder, who is being reworked in 14.23. They are trying to push him more towards gold scaling to kind of enable him to be a better bot laner, better in solo queue without being a pro staple, where he's just able to consistently shove every single wave and scales really aggressively. They want to just enable him to be a bit better in solo queue. Hopefully those changes land in a good spot. But for the moment, he does remain within the C tier. Tristana has been gradually gaining popularity and doing a bit better win rate rise. People have already started, had for a while been moving over to the collector variation of the builds. It looks to be a bit more performant, those raw AD options. And overall, the pick just looks to be in a bit better of a spot in the bot lane now. Kind of sits as like a high C tier option. Wouldn't surprise me if she gets like a slight buff down the line if Riot are comfortable with where she's at, and but she's not like overtaking mid and competitive or like a competitive mainstay. But for the moment, she sits as like a C tier option. Lucian has seen better days. He's kind of underperforming and has done for a while, ever since obviously his popularity with pairings like Nami. He has just kind of declined. Like Nami is like a standalone champion. Is definitely doing a lot better at the moment. Lucian hasn't really found his footing. Obviously, once again, requires strong execution. Is a bit shorter range than a lot of the other options. Tends to be a bit more dependent on specific pairings to get the most value out of this kind of a pick. And it once again prohibits him from really being in the higher tiers. But he can still definitely work. He can be a really oppressive mid lane option if you're able to consistently rotate spells and ultimates on mid wave, and then utilize that pressure to move into sides or secure objectives. Zoe is moving up from the D to the C tier. So this is like a high C tier option now. The static shift change was actually really big for her in the same patch where Yuntals has become like a really viable option on Zoe. Overall, it's just meant that she's kind of once again risen back up as a good option. With Yuntals being buffed next patch, I imagine she'll probably end up shifting over to that, but static should definitely remain as like a viable option on her, especially if she wants access to a bit more wave clear. That is definitely there for her. But overall, Zoe just looking to be a bit more performant now. I wouldn't say she is no longer a must avoid. I'd say she's like a good option for you if you're comfortable on the pick and you're very comfortable just being like a hyperscaler going late and then utilizing the movement, the damage of the champion to really carry games out. Varus is going to remain in the C tier. The buffs were nice. Free flat damage on the W has definitely helped him. The problem with Varus though at the moment is he doesn't really have many other builds outside the on-hit variation, the Bork into your Ginsu's. Other than maybe like a Kraken or a static variant, I want to see these items be picked a bit more on Varus. I think actually static could definitely be a really viable Varus option. It's just very unpopular on him at the moment. So if you're wanting to play Varus, I'd recommend looking into that, see how it feels, and see if you're comfortable utilizing that item. But the more standard routes are your Bork, your Ginsu's, lethality Varus. This isn't really that viable at the moment. There are Yomu's rush options that definitely looks to be more performant than opportunity rush on him, but The overall core just looks to be considerably weak ever since they nerfed the QAD ratio on Varus by 20%. Definitely did hit that variant, and AP was already gone quite a bit before that when they nerfed the AP ratio on his W quite aggressively. Overall, he sits as like a high C2 option next to Zeri. I think both these champions can still be very viable on like certain spikes, and like you can utilize their hyper carry potential. Samira is going to drop down to the C tier. Samira's been underperforming for a while. I was kind of hesitant dropping her down to the C tier, as obviously she can have like really high highs, can really like punish lanes and snowball aggressively, but over time that's just not really converting as well, and has definitely left her dropping down towards the C tier. I think she's another champion which could do with being buffed, whereas like some of these other options can still aggressively scale into the late game. Samira really struggles. She's a short range champion reliant on bursting people down and snowballing to close out games. It's less consistent, it requires better execution oftentimes, and yeah, she drops down to like a mid-C tier pick. I'm still going to have Draven maintain his spot within the B tier. I think Draven has a bit better time like dominating lanes, and then can convert his advantages a bit better. Obviously still requires very good execution to work, but I still think there's like a good amount of value to a pick like Draven. I just think Samira is slightly on the weak side at the moment. I could probably do with some slight buffs to like bring her back up as like a solid option, especially with Collector being nerfed. That should impact both these champions. Obviously Draven does sometimes like rush other options with like your BTs, but it will definitely hit both of these champions. Aphelios is also another champion which is going to be impacted by collector buffs in 14.23, but for the moment he's a good B tier pick. Like if you enjoy Aphelios, he is a very solid option for you. I don't know if we'll start seeing people shift over to Yuntals over Collector. I still believe Collector will probably end up being his main item, but the Yuntal buffs are good. They are very nice. They don't fix the issue with the item. Like I don't like the direction they took with them, but there is no doubt that Yuntals as an item is going to be very good. It just still has the build path issue. Obviously the Hextech alternator attack speed version, I can't remember, Scout Slingshot, BF Sword and Longsword is just not a great build path. Like if you're backing on a 1.1k, that feels really rough oftentimes. You either want to back onto the full BF Sword, or there's not really another great spike in amongst that, so it's an unfortunate spot to be in for that item. I hope they rectify that down the line. I've spoken to like high elo ADC mains who also voice the same complaints as a lot of other people, and yeah, that's the main issue with the item at the moment. But it is, as it like once you have it online, very strong, and should continue to be very strong with the buffs to it this patch. Ezreal, going to maintain his spot within the B tier. Still one of the champions within the bot lane which can have some of the highest highs. If you're consistently rotating skill shots and playing really aggressively in lane, and yeah, you're rotating PTA, you're landing your W Qs, you're landing your just outright Qs, and you're playing very forward, this champion can feel really oppressive to play against and can be really valuable. If you're not consistently landing your skill shots, then this champion does lose a lot of value, but auto weaving is still very much important on Ezreal. That is one of the more, as like Riot put it, like elite kind of aspects of this champion, is how much DPS like lower elo and average elo players will lose by just not consistently auto weaving with the attack speed build up which you get from consistently landing spells. So that's something to be cognitive of. If you enjoy Ezreal, then yeah, make sure you're utilizing the full potential of his kit, but he's in a good spot at the moment for the champion which he is. Xayah got buffed. The W obviously gained more damage, 5% more damage, and that did help her. She does move up to the B tier. She's still going to be conditional. You're not going to want to pick her into every game. She is relatively short range, reliant on people diving into her to get maximum value out of her kit, but she still can be really valuable in lane if you're playing around your W uptime, and you're utilizing that to be effective as a DPS and as a carry champion. Yasuo and Kaiser are the two other champions. There's three other champions. Yasuo and Kaiser are still going to maintain their spots within the B tier. So I think Yasuo is a very solid bot lane option. Can be very oppressive into a lot of the ranged matchups where they just don't really have the tools to mitigate his all-in or lane against him effectively when Windwall comes out. In Kaiser's case, she actually drops towards the lower end of the B tier. She's still really flexible in her build options. Like, you can opt into things like artillery, but and like there are some I've seen like hybrid like lethality and like just like on hit crit options. They look less consistent. Like, I will still continue to recommend like your on hits, your static kick ins, use into like your Nashes and stuff, or you're opting into things like Rabadon's, Crypt Bloom, or Void Staff, depending on what you need later on into the game. And you're playing more like an artillery W harass champion, which can be a very effective playstyle in the right games, but the pick has definitely lost a lot of value, especially with the last nerf where they quite aggressively went after the passive, making her less synergistic with all-in supports and just overall generalistic power down. So she does drop towards the low end of the B tier. She looks to have stayed relatively neutral with the static shift changes though this patch, so yeah, just going to maintain her spot within the B tier. And then we have Vayne, who obviously is a pretty interesting champion. I know a lot of Vayne mains are just very frustrated where she is at the moment. She's fine though in the bot lane. Like, the buffs to her this patch took her from like a low B to like a high B. Obviously there are problems with her builds. Like, some people don't really like just the perma bork into Ginsu's and would rather play some of the alternatives, or they don't like the Q max. They'd rather go into like a W max kind of build, which just isn't really as good anymore after they nerfed that and then buffed up Qmax in a previous patch a while ago. Overall, this champion is still performant though. Does lack wave clear, but has some of the best dueling potential of any marksman in the game. Very hard to like lock down if you don't have point and click CC, and that can be a really valuable tool. She's not a pick you're gonna want to play every game, and she definitely has very punishing lanes, which is like one of the main problems of the champion. But there's no doubt that she is definitely doing a bit better at the moment, since it's a high B tier option, albeit the buffs weren't really maybe what she needed, but that is what she did end up getting. The A tier picks then. So Brand is going to still remain in the A tier. He's still a great low elo option as like a mage within the bot lane. He definitely benefits from the item system overall at the moment, which is why he's ended up being nerfed so many times. It's just how synergistic he is with a lot of the options. Whether that's like your Blackfires, your Leandries, your Rylai's. There's just options there for him, and it can enable him to output some of the most DPS within the game. Obviously, his outright damage isn't going to be as high, especially now that they've tagged his passive a bit, so that overall burst is just going to be a bit less oppressive, but he's still once again a very good low to mid elo option. Does tend to struggle in the higher ranks though, where people are more consistently playing around the spread he has and the dodging his skill shots more consistently. Ziggs and Veigar, also A tier options. They just sit towards the low end of the A tier. They can both function quite comfortably, and if you need an AP pick, then these are two champions you can go to, along with the likes of Lux. She is also still a very viable option. They all do obviously kind of unique things. Like Ziggs, you're playing him more for his siege and artillery. Veigar more for his scaling and cage value. In Lux's case, she has great burst and great wave clear, but can definitely struggle if ever really falling behind. Like, she's more snowball reliant than the other two, and that can obviously be a pain point of the champion. But these are four AP champions still very good in the bot lane, and if you're very comfortable playing them, then yeah, they can definitely have a lot of value. Karthus going to remain towards the higher end of the A tier. I'd say Karthus is a bit better than the other four options here. His overall DPS and damage output is some of the highest in the game as well. Like, the ultimate is a very powerful tool, and he can oftentimes just outright win a lot of lanes and scale very aggressively and be very potent pick just in general. That is definitely very valuable. Obviously, he has been tagged a couple of times. They went after his Q flat damage at one point. They went after his R AP ratio with the last set of nerfs, but he's still a very solid pick. Definitely sits towards the higher end of the A tier. He is very unpopular in the bot lane though now, so I don't really know who to recommend to watch if you want to learn Karthus bot lane, but if you're comfortable on it and you've put the games in, he can still definitely output a huge amount of value and be a very effective pick within the draft if you need an AP option. MF is getting buffed in 14.23. They're not big buffs, they're like a slight mana buff to her Q, so it wouldn't really shift her amount. I'm honestly surprised they're doing anything to her. I think she's just in a good spot at the moment. She is one of the ADCs which I'd recommend newer people to the role, kind of begin with, as she is very linear in the playstyle, can be quite oppressive in lane if you're effectively landing Q bounces from minion to champion, utilizing your E to effectively close people down and then outputting damage. She doesn't have as high DPS as like a lot of the other marksmen, so she doesn't have the hyper carry capability of like a Zeri or a Jinx or a Sivir, for example, but she's still really quite comfortably is a good standing ADC, and that ultimate can be a really valuable tool if you can like utilize it effectively within a team fight. She's a good A tier pick, and I will continue to recommend her in her current state. Sivir is doing better. Obviously, they buffed her base AD, they buffed her Q slightly, and that definitely put her in a better spot, and she is a champion I will once again go back to recommending. I think MF, Sivir, Ashe, Jhin and Jinx are like good picks, like when you are beginning the role and like you want like certain things from it, whether it's like hyper carry capability, you want to be more of a caster, you want like more CC within your kit. These champions can all be quite valuable. Obviously Ashe is a bit more elite skewed at the moment, which definitely does hurt her more for the average player. Like I don't think Ashe is as go-to as she has been in the past, unless obviously you're looking for a utility marksman, which in which case she is like one of the best, if not just outright the most valuable, maybe contested with the likes of Jhin. But Ashe, yeah, very good A tier pick, has hyper carry capability, has CC, but can definitely feel punishing if falling behind, and can obviously it hasn't got the mobility of the other marksman options, which is definitely where like she falters the most. Hui is going to remain in the A tier. I love Hui bot lane. I think Hui bot lane is still a very, very strong pick, which is very underplayed in his current state. The wave clear he has access to, the tools within his kit, Blackfire Torch being a really strong item on him in his current state. It just all comes together as him being like a really valuable champion, especially paired alongside like strong supports which can play off of his kit, whether that's like CC. You're not going to play him with enchanters obviously, but like the likes of Nami can still be a very valuable pairing which can function with him. And overall, yeah, Hui, great bot lane option. If you're comfortable with him, yeah, he's a really valuable pick down here. Jinx is going to remain in the A tier. She's obviously being changed in 14.23. They're trying to push her less, or push her away from her like collector, caster orientated builds, more towards like attack speed builds by buffing up her AD growth and then nerfing down her W total AD ratio. So they're kind of just incentivizing less AD purchases and more attack speed purchases. Whether that will like fully swing her, I don't really know at the moment. I think there is definitely some back and forth which can like have value there, and it will maybe become a bit more dependent on the game state, but she's still a very solid option. Great when you get early kills, can really comfortably have a good mid game, can obviously snowball very aggressively into late game if you're looking at like a 4 or 5 item Jinx. She can be very good at as like a hyper carry option. Does obviously once again lack the inherent safety of some of the like more mobile marksmen, doesn't have any dashes, so that can feel quite punishing, but she is a very good hyper carry, especially if she gets the ball rolling early. Corki moves down from the S tier to the A tier. He's still got one of the most oppressive, actually he probably has the most oppressive laning phase of any marksman now, like even over the likes of Draven. When you're running Halo Blades and you're rushing Collector on this champion, he is very, very hard to shut down. I believe you can also go the likes of Trinity on this pit, like Trinity Rush, and he can still definitely output a lot of value. I just think that Collector in its current state was one of the solid options on him. Actually, it looks like people have just shifted over to Trinity. Collector previously was one of his better options, but yeah, they did nerf his total AD down, so they nerfed his AD growth down, which is like going to be his total AD, and then buffed up the true damage passive, so that does incentivize less lethality purchases and more like, yeah, your Trinity forces, where you can get a lot of value out of Sheen with that passive. So Trinity, Manamune, you can go Collector if you're snowballing. It's not as mandatory as I originally thought it was, but it's still a very good option there for him. And overall, yeah, Corki in a really good spot at the moment as a good laner. Not gonna quite, it's just not gonna scale as well as the other marksman. That is his biggest downfall. Like, he doesn't scale that well. He's relatively short range, more reliant on burst than a lot of the other options. But he can definitely be potent. Like, he's a marksman at the end of the day. There is still a level of inherent scaling there. The range has value, so he sits within the A tier for the moment. The other picks here, Ben. So Seraphine is going to be dropped from the S plus to the S tier. This is a low S tier option now. They nerfed her Q AP ratio, which is her main trading tool and her main CSing tool. So that is going to hit bot lane Seraphine the most over the likes of support Seraphine and, well, actually just support Seraphine. You don't really see mid Seraphine anymore. But yeah, Seraphine does take a bit of a tag there. Goes from the S plus to the S tier. Nyla is still a very good S tier option. Like, I really encourage people to play Nyla. Obviously, she's not going to be a pick which everyone enjoys. She is a bit unique compared to a lot of the other marksman pool, playing more around burst and diving in than a lot of the other options, which are more reliant on like their kiting and utilizing their range to its full extent. But she's still a very good option. Pairs really nicely with a lot of supports. Just not she's not mandatory. Like, I think the likes of Caitlyn is a really good champion at the moment. It's a bit more mandatory. Like, you should be playing Caitlyn on the current patch, which is why I've bumped her up to the S tier. She's been gaining play rate, ban rate, win rate like over time, and yeah, she was a high A tier pick in the previous patch, I would have said, but yeah, S tier pick this patch with the likes of Corki, Seraphine being like dragged down slightly. I think she's like really risen up as a really strong option. Her early game can be really oppressive if you utilize the full extent of her 650 range, but she scales incredibly well at the moment. The crit scaling of this champion is some of the best within the game. Like, she has 2 outputs of crit scaling, and that is on the headshot and on the ultimate, which, yeah, like, just means she scales really well at the moment. So also, yeah, gold scaling also very important on her. Character rush looks to be just the best way to play her. That is being after in the next patch, and they are going after her ultimate. Do I think this will suddenly take her down substantially? Probably not. I think she'll drop from the S tier to the A tier again. You should probably learn Caitlyn on the current patch. Like, she is, yeah, in a very good spot. The other options are Jhin. I don't like Jhin that much. I've continued to voice my dislike for Jhin. I think he gives over a lot of agency a lot of the other marksmen have. Doesn't have the same hyper carry capability. He does have some of the highest damage within the game, obviously. That's gonna come from the fact that he has a prohibited attack, well, he just has an attack speed cap on his auto, so he has to output a lot of damage to make up for that, which can be, yeah, quite potent, quite powerful. Definitely can give him a lot of power in lane if you're like auto shoving waves of the likes of Q. That definitely does have its strengths. He just doesn't have the agency a lot of the other marksmen do, but his utility output is, yeah, also really good. Like, most marksmen don't have access to anywhere near the utility he has with the ultimate slow, the W route, the E slow. It just gives him a lot of tools to work with. I wouldn't say he's the go-to carry option, but like, he's there. Like, he's a good option. Like, no doubt about it. Jhin is a good pick. It's not something I'd really recommend. I do recommend Kog'Maw, though. I love Kog'Maw. Both the on-hit and the AP builds are really good on him at the moment. Obviously, his pick rate has skyrocketed with the AP variation gaining consistent popularity through the likes of Reptile and like some other like people on Twitter who've like really been trying to push for this to be his viable, be like one of his options and one of his builds. Whether that's like, yeah, just continuously dropping E on the wave and then kind of not really giving the enemy at ADC the response to kind of answer back. It just makes him really powerful and can, yeah, really prohibit anyone from just interacting with the lane, which is a very, yeah, strong and powerful tool to have. Obviously, on-hit Kog'Maw still really good. Like, both, I'd say, are S tier picks at the moment. AP Kog'Maw probably closer to S plus than on-hit Kog'Maw, but yeah, both are really good in their current states. And then Swain. He got overbuffed this patch, no doubt about it. He is probably the best bot lane option in the game. His other roles look to be slightly weaker. Like, I think mid lane is strong, and I'd say bot and support, I'd say, is kind of, it's okay. Top lane looks weak. Obviously, he just struggles a bit more in the longer lane. But bot lane Swain, there are a couple of notes here. One is that Blackfire looks better than Malignance as a first item. Rylai's looks less mandatory now. Cosmic Drive looks really good on him. So these are things you should probably look at and be aware of. Other things are like Leandri's still really good. Zhonya's is still really good on him. Gives him a bit more flexibility in his builds. Capstone items include the likes of Riftmaker. Like, if you've already got a lot of HP from your passive, it can be quite powerful. Give you a lot more AP through the item. You have Abyssal Mask is still really good on him. Even the likes of Unending Despair can work really nicely as like a 5th slot item. Obviously, that is rarely going to happen, but there are capstone options for him. Even the likes of Jack Show, like if you pick up something like a Zonya's, it compare with that, increasing the overall resist that is going to give him. And he's just in a really good spot at the moment. The E is obviously faster. He's more, well, I say a bit more consistent. His consistency is in other places. I don't know if I would say he is the consistent champion. He's obviously relatively short range with his ultimate still. Can get kited out or pilled for. Like, there are things which he's restricted from doing. He's not going to have the same single target damage or DPS which a lot of the other picks are going to have. But his overall teamfight damage is incredible. His uptime, his durability, just give him a different role within the bot lane, which is what I really praise him as being the S+ option at the moment. Because in the previous patch, the main thing was he just wasn't really durable enough. He didn't really do enough damage, but they buffed the Q damage, his main spell. They buffed his magic resist growth, which gives him a bit more durability, and they buffed the R AP ratio heal. So he just ended up more durable, doing more damage, and that was really big for him. So he definitely sits as my premier bot lane pick at the moment. But I think things like Kog'Maw, honestly, like really close. Like Kog'Maw, you could actually have alongside him. I think this champion is still like really good. And yeah, those are my thoughts. So thank you guys for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.